If you've been mistreated at work, belittled, humiliated, pushed past your limits, you may have turned to the Human Resources Department for help. Sometimes they do help, but many times they don't. If you've turned to HR yourself, you may have come away feeling worse. There's a clear reason why. In this video, we'll explain why HR often takes the side of the offender. Many workers think of HR as a neutral third party that's there to help if something goes wrong. We assume they're dedicated to fairness, that abusive behavior would appall them, that they care about our well-being. It's not difficult to see where the misconception comes from. After all, HR is the giver of helpful information, things like insurance benefits, retirement plans, and company perks. They're seen in hallways and break rooms hanging posters about equal employment rights. They keep us informed about policies and company values. They're the warm and friendly face we come to trust during onboarding. But the HR you meet during onboarding isn't the HR you meet when there's a conflict. The former is patient and supportive. The latter can seem distant, uninterested, even dismissive. And that's when we're confronted with the gap between perception and reality. Because the role of HR is not to ensure fairness and punish bad behavior. Their role is to protect the organization from legal risk. Their purpose is aligned to support the objectives of senior leadership. And as we'll see in a moment, that's the primary factor driving their behavior when they receive a complaint about a bully. Before we go further, let's take a moment to understand where HR actually came from, because it hasn't always been known as human resources. In its earliest form, HR began during the rise of industrialization in the late 1800s. Back then, workers were viewed as parts in a machine. The focus was on output, not worker concerns. This system was heavily influenced by Frederick Winslow Taylor and the idea of scientific management, where work was relentlessly measured and optimized. At the time, HR was known as personnel management, and it was focused on hiring efficient workers, enforcing control and discipline, and standardizing the behaviors that turned out the most productive results. The concepts of psychological safety, emotional well-being, and workplace dignity simply didn't exist. If a boss was harsh or abusive, it was often seen as good management. Things shifted slightly more in favor of the worker in the 1930s, with the onset of the labor movement. Unions became commonplace and worker protections increased, especially after the National Labor Relations Act. The personnel department was forced to shift as well. It took on new responsibilities like handling complaints, mediating disputes, and ensuring the company stayed compliant with the new labor laws. But even then, the real purpose of the personnel department didn't change. It was still there to protect the organization from risk. It may have started handling complaints and mediating disputes, but it was never a neutral advocate for the employee. Instead, it was a buffer, a shield against lawsuits. By the 1980s, the corporate era was well underway, and the personnel department had changed its moniker to Human Resources. Management science had evolved, and HR began to take on its modern look and feel. Performance management systems, corporate culture initiatives, and leadership development programs became the norm. With this latest shift, HR became aligned under the purview of executive leadership at most organizations. They're still charged with protecting the company from legal liability on the employment front, but their success is also tied to company performance. And that is the main reason for the gap between expectation and reality when we turn to HR for support when we're bullied. If you don't understand that the true purpose of HR is to protect the company, it can feel right to go directly to them when you're being abused at work. Most people who turn to HR in these situations do so because they expect that HR has a system in place to protect them, that HR is concerned about accountability and fairness. That instinct isn't wrong. It's human, and the Human Resources Department sounds like a place to go when you need support. That's why so many people expect advocacy, protection, and validation when they turn to HR for help with a bully. You walk into the HR office expecting care and concern for your well being. You believe your complaint will be addressed. There will be an investigation. You'll be protected. But instead of the bully's behavior being addressed, HR reframes the situation. And that's not accidental, because the system you thought was designed to help and protect you is actually a system designed to protect the company from the risk associated with what you're reporting. You're coming at it from a fairness mindset. HR isn't. To many, that feels like betrayal. Once you recognize that the true purpose of HR is to protect the company and not the employee, it's easier to make sense out of their reaction to your complaint. You're interested in protecting your career, your livelihood, your future. You're asking, how do we make this right? But HR is asking, what's the risk to the company and how do we contain it? So, coming at it from their perspective, here are 4 reasons why HR may support your bully instead of protecting you. 1. The abuse might be wrong, but it's not illegal. Most workplace abuse lives in a gray area. It's not against the law to disrespect an employee or talk down to someone. It's not illegal to exclude them from meetings, change expectations constantly, take credit for their work, or publicly humiliate them. It's wrong. It's damaging. It's often devastating. But it's not always illegal. The distinction matters because HR is trained to act when there's legal liability, not emotional harm. Workplace abuse becomes illegal only when it's tied to a protected class, like race, gender, age, religion, or disability. That means the issue isn't just what happened, it's why it happened. If someone is treated badly for personal or arbitrary reasons, it may be harmful, but it's not against the law. The legal line is crossed when the behavior is connected to who you are, not just how you're treated. So if the bully isn't clearly in violation of a protected class law, HR may not act. Remember that HR is closely aligned with senior leadership, and their success depends on the success of the company. If the person mistreating you drives results, hits aggressive targets, or if they're close to leadership, HR will weigh their value against the risk of your complaint. If the bad behavior doesn't put the company at risk of a protected class lawsuit, HR could decide to tolerate it in favor of good business results. 3. He said, she said syndrome. Workplace bullying rarely leaves clear evidence. If there's no recording, no paper trail, no blatant, indisputable violation, then it's your word against theirs. And here's the problem. Bullies are usually very good at managing perception. They act differently around leadership, frame you as difficult, and subtly undermine your credibility. So when HR investigates, it looks like a misunderstanding, a personality conflict, some kind of communication problem, or worse, a performance issue, not abuse. 4. The last reason has to do with company culture. As you've heard, it comes from the top. Sometimes a single person isn't the issue. If senior leaders tolerate aggressive behavior, reward intimidation, ignore complaints, or promote people who create fear as a means to get results, then HR is operating inside that culture. It's a systemic issue. In that type of system, the bully isn't the problem. He's the model. We've done several videos on this channel about workplaces like this. Look for our special reports on 9 Entertainment, Wells Fargo, and others. If you've gone to HR for help and come away feeling deflated and confused, just remember, it's not personal. Their goal isn't validation or justice, not even fairness. It's containment and legal protection for the company. If they minimize your problem, dismiss your concerns, or make you second-guess your perception of reality, you're not alone. One of the hardest things about coping with psychological abuse in the workplace is realizing that the system wasn't designed to keep you whole. But understanding how it works can give you strength. If this content resonates with you, make sure to like and subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified when we post new videos. Future topics include advice about whether you should report a bully to HR, and also, is there anyone else you should share your story with? Thanks for listening.